In the latest chapter of One Piece, after our hiatus away from the story, the fans are rewarded with something we can only say we've been waiting for years and years now, and that's our first true glimpse at the island known as Elbaph, the land of the giants.
Yeah, man, absolutely worth the wait.
And the chapter title itself, pretty straight to the point, gets us right to what we're talking about, being Adventure in Elbaph. And we're no longer on the outskirts, we're no longer just sailing to get there. We have fully arrived into the heart of this island. And before we can gush too much over this chapter, I feel like we should probably start with the cover series.
Yeah, and honestly a little disappointed that there's not too much to talk about, because while Yamato and her party are still in pursuit of the thief who took Yasui's sword, it kind of just seems like the trails run cold, because we just find ourselves once again making a pit stop, and now we're in Udon, which, you know, a prison.
Yeah, the same prisons that once held Luffy, and we do see some of those prisons still in the background of this landscape. But there is a new project in the works now, and that would be the reconstruction of Udon Castle, which, if you don't recognize that, don't feel bad, because to my knowledge and research, we as viewers have never actually seen a castle in this region before. So perhaps this is more of an effort to cultivate, like, restoring very old customs and traditions of the Wano country, even before Odin's time.
Yeah, and like you said, in itself, it's cool that they're rebuilding old Wano, but it'd be a lot cooler if we were just following Yamato through a basic pilgrimage instead of her having a very clear goal, and at this moment specifically having something greater that she needs to accomplish.
And still spending all her time doing
this.
Yeah,
like we're just seeing more sightseeing. Like the last chapter we were chasing something, and now we're just walking through. Like, I need to see at least the beginning of getting the sword back and getting it to where it's supposed to be.
No, I understand what you're saying, absolutely. The sense of she's kind of just curting her responsibility, and it makes it feel a bit less endearing to Yamato as a character.
Right, it's the fact that this cover series is supposed to have a destination, and we really just haven't seen the urge to get there yet.
But hopefully in the next chapter we get to at least see more of an active chase back towards her actual objective. However, we can turn our focus to a different part of the One Piece world, and that being the shores of Elbaph itself, as we begin the chapter with the return of the giant warrior pirates and the Great Eric pulling up on the shores of Elbaph again, and we see the same giant child that met with Shanks in the bar, and his name is Colon.
I would like to believe it's Cologne.
It's possibly Cologne.
I just want to believe that they wouldn't name a child Colon.
It is a bit weird, but it's not uncommon for Oda to use just the weirdest names. There's Charlotte Highfat, for God's sake. But regardless of the child's name, they are calling out to the returning captains to see if they'd like to stop by for a drink. But the Giants have more important orders, and they're not wasting any time getting the precious cargo of the Straw Hats straight to the village.
Which is definitely for the best, because as they say, if they stop in, it could take up to 3 days. But before Carlon can even rush after the crew, the barkeep tells him that if he's headed towards the Sun Realm, to bring a picnic basket along with him, because there's some treats for his father.
Yeah, we don't actually know who his father is. To my knowledge, maybe it will be revealed that it's like another giant we've already met. But it seems more that this is kind of just like a fan of piracy and of the giant warrior pirates. It's kind of like what Luffy was as a kid. He looks up to strong individuals, and it makes sense. But he sets out from that bar, and as he's leaving, he keeps in mind that this is actually the same pirate that Shanks was telling him about and told him the name of, Luffy. And I think initially a lot of people might have thought that Shanks was kind of going around to other bars, inspiring kids kind of like he did to Luffy, making it a bit less special. But I do think it's also partially just how much he adores his pupil, and kind of like how Rayleigh just finds the chance to brag about him every now and then.
Yeah, like he's inspiring kids still, but it's for Luffy.
And before we see more of this travel to the Sun Realm, we get a somewhat of a reunion between Harudine and Stanson, who then spot the Great Eric as they're approaching this gigantic rainbow bridge. And, I mean, this is the same people that inspired their own crew. The giant warrior pirates spawned the new giant warrior pirates, so I imagine they have a great deal of excitement just seeing them pulling back up, but knowing that they also have their bosses in the Straw Hats aboard as well.
Definitely. But, like, also, can we just take a moment? This rainbow is huge, and, like, we take a step back and see it in its entirety, and it just dwarfs the ship, which is a giant ship. So you can only imagine what that looks like to the regular people on that ship.
Yeah, everyone just seeing this
Blown away.
Golden Gate Bridge, essentially, of just colorful rainbow. And those aboard are struck by its beauty and the wonder that this giant rainbow is just casting over this whole sea around it. But to Broggy and Doria, this is nothing. This is just the most ordinary thing ever. And they do clarify something that was a bit of a confusing point in translation in one of the previous chapters, being, oh yeah, these can all just be drawn by the Sunstone Painter. So not a Sunstone Pinder, whatever the hell that is, but a Sunstone Painter, which is apparently just this stone that can cast a whole physical bridge of rainbow out onto anywhere on the ocean. Like, the most common thing to them. And we've seen nothing like this.
Yeah, and very understandably, Jimba's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Like, that's not how this is supposed to work, right? But they're just like, no, dude, this is what rainbows are for. Like, what do you mean?
I almost wonder if they haven't seen, like, other rainbows. If this is just the only kind of rainbow they know about, and they're like, yeah, we just draw these things.
Or if they can just do that with regular rainbows.
But like you said, we don't really get a straight answer, and before we can get any more explanation, the crew of the Great Eric just warns their captains and everyone aboard that, alright, it's time to brace, we're gonna hit the rainbow any second now. To which Dory and Broggy almost kind of ominously just go, alright, we're about to go vertical.
Right, which, like, that would terrify me.
You don't want to hear that on the ocean.
Especially as, like, the Straw Hat crew, because they've gone vertical up and down before, and it's usually terrifying.
It's interesting you say that, because one thing to note is about this group that's on the ship as well. The only person that rode the knock-up stream up to Skypiea was Robin. So to Brooke and Frankie and Jinbei, this is a novel experience they have never experienced before.
They've only fallen before.
But when trying to understand what is happening, the Giants just simply aren't explaining. And they're like, oh, we're taking you to the village. It's up on the second level, so we had to use the Rainbow Bridge. Obviously, that's what you're asking about, is that where our village is up there. And I kind of love that both Frankie and Robin are both just tired of them deflecting, and they're like, no, this is scientifically impossible. What the hell is going on?
Yeah, like, actually, though, give us a straight answer. And I think it's just funny that it wasn't Lilith, who has spent her entire life, you know, recreating and morphing what nature can do. It's just the two are like, no, at a base level, this shouldn't be possible. This isn't real.
But all we get back is, but rainbows are meant to be crossed.
Man, shut up.
Like, what do you mean by that?
Please tell me.
I don't know if we're ever going to get an answer. This might just be Oda messing with us.
Probably not for a minute.
But this did seem like a good enough answer for the crew, as they give up on asking any further questions and simply take the experience of riding this atop a rainbow. And they do begin to comment on just how amazing riding this rainbow is. Like, this is the sickest thing ever.
I mean, yeah, I bet it was. Because, like, Bonnie and Robin both admire the pleasant sound that sailing on the rainbow produces, which is a familiar tune of Bink's Sake. Which, I'm just excited to see how the anime actually plays that out. Because I bet it's beautiful. But this could also just be what the rainbow sounds like, is, you know, a crew together, like, harmony.
Mm-hmm. If this is the sound that the rainbow makes when they ride on it, that's such a wildly, like, convoluted concept on top of this already impossible thing. that it almost just feels like Oda's messing with this even further. He's like, yeah, this totally rainbow bridge thing that always existed also plays the song that means everything to these characters. And it's like,
well, and especially Brooke, who is on the ship right now. Like, I'd love to see how he interprets it.
But anytime that those lyrics of that song come up, it is
special.
It's
special.
It's a stopper moment. But before long, Dory and Broggy notice that there is also another ship riding this rainbow alongside them, and it's carrying Habrudin and Stanston, who couldn't wait to not only see their captains again, these giants that inspired them, but also to share, be like, hey, we caught a moose.
Yeah, right.
Like, check out our hunting success.
Well, especially because they, rightfully so, assume that Luffy's there. You know, it's for Luffy, it's for the Straw Hats. And we then cut away from the rainbow to the rope bridge from the previous chapter, where we see Gerd and Goldberg still chasing down Road, but now out of nowhere, Luffy comes flying in.
It's almost hard to see him the first time you read over the
I
chapter.
didn't see it. Like, I had to go back a couple times, be like, where the fuck did he come from? What's happening?
It almost looks like he just got thrown into frame.
He might have.
Maybe, but as he's midair, Luffy being Luffy points out, he's like, hey, that's my ship, and he yells at them immediately, because he's like, that's my boat. Take your hands off my boat.
Yeah. I've already lost one.
And both of them, like we had commented previously, if they had just spoken up sooner, these are their subordinates. They recognize Luffy.
Yeah, well, like, they got respect for him.
Yeah, Gerd even holds him in her hand, and she starts going on in her own rant about, oh my god, I love little people so much. Sorry, I'm not like Road. Don't group me in with Road. I am not a creep. I just find you guys cool. And it's just kind of humanizing. Like, it's these kind of small interactions that really make the characters of this world feel alive.
Right, yeah. But, well, it also draws back to the previous chapters where Gerd couldn't stand Road, and Goldberg was like, whatever. He's a good navigator. And now she's like, yeah, I'm so sorry for him. You know, this, that. He's like, yeah, they understand that. he's the down-to-earth one.
She hates him, but she's not too dissimilar from him as she
right.
like to think.
They have similar, like, thought processes. She just, like, handles it better and, like,
has a sense of morality.
Yeah, and respect. Like, whereas dude just insane.
Yeah.
Road's just crazy.
Gerd does seem to turn her attention a bit more focused after Goldberg calls her out, and he's like, now's not the time for this. But she does turn this tangent into somewhat of an apology, as she talks about in regards to Luffy and his crew being in prison without any choice or the chance to retaliate.
He finally figures it out.
Yeah, that's when he starts to piece it together that, oh, they're talking about the Skull Mask guy.
You're not with them.
So these guys must be against him or something. But Goldberg, again, kind of being a bit more astute, makes the observation that Luffy did just get hurled from the realm of the dead, and rightfully posits the question of, like, so did you fall? What were you doing there?
Right. And, like, that's what makes me very ready to learn more about Goldberg, because he was also mentioned along with, the birth of Loki and all that. Like, he was a part of that, too. Same scene, same everything, like...
Already has the connection to the character, so might have a keener sense of what is, like, raised alongside him.
We don't know anything about him, but, like, he could be that guy that's holding it together, and I feel like it's been a long time since we saw Luffy this shook before.
Yeah.
Because, he's sweating.
Yeah.
And we don't know what was said. I feel like, especially with Luffy, we usually know what happened. So to have that gap in information of what our captain was up to, and especially what deal he agreed to, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, we only get the one brief flashback panel of that end of that conversation, and it could be any number of things when you're dealing with the trickster character.
Oh, absolutely.
But considering Loki already kind of got an idea that Luffy was interested in Shanks and hearing more information about Shanks, I think it's fair to assume that it's likely a deal brokering information for some form of service that Loki's hoping Luffy will eventually free him. But that is a question we want to ask all of you as to what is your own personal idea of what deal Luffy made with Loki?
Right, because honestly, there's endless possibilities.
But whatever deal was made, it's clear, you're right, Luffy's shook up and he's very serious about the severity of this deal, so he's not going to begin to like, he starts breaking into a sweat and dodging the question.
And in true Straw Hat form, he's not good at lying.
No, he's horrible at lying.
But, you know, it was only a few chapters ago that they were bad at lying, but it was goofy then. This felt like big, you know, this felt important.
And
like, you saw it in his face.
Yeah, I don't believe that Loki himself might have gotten to Luffy. I do think what Loki says might have a bit more weight to Luffy, especially if it is in regards to Shanks. Telling him, like, hey, maybe there's something I know about this captain that you had, like, idolized that you don't really know about the true self of him. And that might shake up Luffy a lot more than any kind of hockey or Conqueror's hockey or any spell or any whatnot.
That's rude. Like, you know, that's what he's wearing on his head. Like, what does the Straw Hat really mean? And then that also brings in the question, can he really trust him?
I agree. And before we can get any more indication from Luffy as to what the deal that occurred in the realm of the dead might be, we do cut away to the end of that same rope bridge where Road has finally caught up to Nami and Chopper and the others, and without any thought or reason just lunges towards them and immediately threatens to capture them again.
Yeah, and this is them, again, showcasing that they're all, like, they're smart, they're battle-hardened. This is just a trap, because we see he's immediately crushed by a giant tree that was chopped down to trap him in place, and also just, like, shows how, like, gullible he is.
Yeah, he's immediately tunnel visioned by the chance to have them as living dolls again, and immediately falls for the trap, like you said, put the two weakest members out there and hide your true strength. But seeing as these two are immediately just putting him down in his place and insulting him as he's down, they just kind of prepare to leave him there, honestly, on the next page as they set off to try and explore this new country. Before they can even take another step, we hear yells from Gerd and Goldberg, who have finally caught up to the rest of the group. And for some reason, Road believes that Gerd is coming to save him.
I bet it's for the exact same reason that, like, he holds Nami and Chopper in high regard. He's a fucking creep, dude. He's just a weirdo.
This is quickly shown not to be the case, of course, as both Gerd and Goldberg leap into action with their biggest weapon they got, and just, they jump to essentially annihilate this pinned man under a tree, and he deserves every second of it.
Do it again!
And of course, seeing a giant, beautiful woman in front of him, Sanji's immediately sent into love-struck state again. But it is in a bit of a nicer appreciation. I don't feel like anything he says this chapter really crosses any lines. It's just back to the kind of overly lovey Sanji that I do find a lot more tolerable.
Yeah, absolutely fine with it. Just like, it only bothers me when he's like overtly saying weird shit.
Yeah.
Like in front of the person he's talking about, you know? When
it's romanticized, it's a bit better than pervy. Like pervy.
Hey, Gerd's attractive. Like, that's cool. It's when you're, like, fantasizing about it in front of their face. Like, that's when it gets weird.
Agreed. But they also do quickly notice that with these giants is their captain accompanying them. And now that they fully introduced themselves without the threat of another giant chasing them, Gerd gets the chance to introduce herself and Goldberg to the rest of the group while just apologizing profusely for everything they've seen. Not only their aggressive attack on Road, but for everything they've had to go through.
She ain't gotta apologize.
No, she just, I think that's kind of her character too, is she's very overly empathetic at times.
Absolutely.
And now that they do have their guides, we're setting off for real Elbaph. They have their guiding star, as Sanji calls it, but we're here.
Well, yeah, and I love that we get that, you know, we're about to be there between Luffy and Usopp of like, hey, you know,
it's time.
It's time. We're there. This is where we're at. Because he yells to him, let's go, Usopp. The village is on this level. And he, you know, he's ready for this.
And when they do realize how close they are, I think Gerd realizes how excited they are, and she just tells them, she's like, you don't have to wait. Yeah. You can take these little cloud roads and bounce your way there.
And again, that's what makes her character so great.
Yeah, she can empathize with how much this means to them, it seems. And while Usopp has his reservations still, where he's like, I've fallen through a sky cloud once, when I dove into one at Skypiea. I don't know if I want to jump, but like as soon as Luffy goes, they're both off to the races. And they're just getting closer and closer to it. But simultaneously, we also cut to the great Eric on this page, who's now also within eyesight of the village amidst the clouds, as Groggy kind of gives us a basic breakdown of the 3 levels that exist for this tree. So maybe not dozens and dozens like we thought, but the 3 enormous levels are of Dead, Sun, and Heaven.
Which I feel like we've seen at least 2 of them. If there's one we haven't seen, it's Heaven.
Yes, I imagine that's probably where the royal family resides.
Yeah.
The higher
but
end.
We've definitely seen the middle, and we've definitely seen Hell.
Yes, we've seen Hell in probably its darkest spot. But it's as we get closer and as all of these parties converge on the same point, that on the next page, we're treated to the first true glimpse of this beautiful, beautiful country of Elbaph. And I encourage everyone to just take an extra minute or so to really look this page over, because while there might not be like, a hidden detail or like these crazy buildings,
I think that's what makes it more beautiful. It's just like, it feels like home.
It's serene.
Yeah, it's scenic.
It's incredibly beautiful. You have rainbows and waterfalls and just this nice tranquil community existing in the heart of Warland.
That's the craziest thing. It's like, this is supposed to be where the killers live. This is supposed to be Warland, like the heartland of death. Man, ain't looking like it.
No, and I think Usopp's tears are absolutely warranted. Not only for the beauty of this, but imagine how he's feeling. Wanting to be there. Through. Yeah,
he's been kicked out of the crew. Thinking about it, he's been back. He's finding himself. You know,
it's awesome that we finally arrived here, and it honestly doesn't really feel real until you get a glimpse of something like this, and it's just undeniable that we are now in the heart of one of the most anticipated arcs of this entire story.
And it feels right. It's the land of the giants, because this is the biggest this story's ever been. And it's also here that we begin the string of commentary that will probably carry us not only to the end of the chapter, but maybe through the whole arc, where 2 scrolls note, "It is a sight of such enormity that it stuns all visitors. Most fail to find words that adequately describe its immense grandeur."
And this message does continue on to the next page, like you said, while we also do get to see just the pure happiest reactions from the crew, like some of the most peaceful, happy looking we've seen them, just reacting to this beautiful sight as it continues on. They call it the Kingdom of Warland. It resides on the massive Isle of Elbaph, hence its more common moniker, Elbaph, the land of the giants. And like I said, every single person gets their own panel of the crew, and just some of the most calm, peaceful looking faces I've ever seen these characters have.
Absolutely. And while we're also learning that, like, the land of Elbaph, that's not even its real name.
Just its common moniker.
Yeah.
And as they pull closer to this beautiful sight, they also do look off on the side of the road and see their captain. And he's just waiting there on this cloud road leading to the same village. So surprisingly, for once, after all of our crew separated at the start of an arc, we are back together within like 10 chapters, which just doesn't happen.
I don't know if that makes you feel safe or more in danger.
Yeah, it almost feels wrong that happened.
It really does.
But it only takes a second before this trio of Luffy, Chopper, and Usopp on the final page are like, "Oh, hey, guy, are you riding a rainbow?"
The big 3 of, oh, shit!
And then, of course, they're like, "Oh, this place is the sickest. I want to turn on the rainbow next."
Yeah.
It's almost too endearing, folks.
And they make sure we know that.
Yeah, the notes that we read on this final page paint a far different image of Elbaph than the one we see before us now, as And stay with me because this is a bit longer when you type it out.
That shit lengthy as hell.
But I do think it's just some very well-written commentary.
Oh, absolutely. And, like, honestly, something we haven't seen in a minute.
Yeah, but it does read, "From the mighty trees to the gentle flowers, from sea to sky to land, all life on this particular island is so huge it takes one's breath away. To those who seek adventure, I concede it would be a great shame to turn away from this adventurous island. However, if nothing else, I implore you to keep this one piece of advice..." One Piece. In the back of your mind. Should you venture out and arrive on Elbaf's vast and mysterious soil, heed my simple warning. And he says this warning like 3 times.
Yep.
If I could only write about one thing about this enticing nation, it would be this: do not stay for too long. Signed, Louis Arnot. So, a man who has very clearly spent some extensive time on this island. And interestingly enough, it is also not the first time we've heard of one Louis Arnot, as the first time we encountered that name was when the crew visited Little Garden, the very first time we met the Giants as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in a mention from a book called Bragman, which is kind of like an encyclopedia, a collection of a bunch of adventurers and different travelers' stories of what they saw, what they did, what they encountered. And this one portion we did hear from Louis Arnot was in regard to Little Garden, an island that he knew had prehistoric life, but also, according to him, was inhabited by giants.
At least 2.
At least 2 of them, which might have been the very reason he was directed towards this land of the giants in the first place. But there is actually a lot more to Bragman and Louis Arnot that might originally meet the eye of just snippets we hear here and there throughout the story. But without going too far into it,
we'll get back to it.
Yeah, we'll come back to it in a more focused video, because we do think some timelines of that adventurer and what he encountered here on Elbaph might reveal more about what this island's really about.
And nothing coincidence, like.
No, there's no coincidences in what he is.
Especially now.
But for now, we can only speculate as to why this seemingly picturesque island is more of a ticking time bomb than anything else.
So most importantly, we just want to say, we made it. We finally fucking made it. And wow. Elbaph not only lives up to the hype, but it exceeds it. Even before we know what's going on, it's just amazing to watch it unfold. We're seeing nature bended. We're seeing even our crew. Question. Worth the wait. Oda has us on the edge of our seats, and we can't wait to see how he makes us jump out of them next. So make sure to like the video to show support. Comment what you think. Luffy is hiding from the rest of the island and the crew, and what the ramifications might be in the long run. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel for more goated One Piece content as we enter more goated One Piece territory. And of course, be crew!